What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another video. So today I want to give an update on one of my favorite clean energy style ETFs, and it's no surprise that that's the iShares Global Clean Energy ETF, ticker symbol INRG or ICLN. Now today we can see on screen that I want to discuss 5 main points in today's video. I'll give a very brief overview, that is, of this ETF if you haven't seen this ETF before. We'll then have a look at my current holdings, how it's performing, and we'll have a look at the charts to see if it's a buy or sell. We'll then give an update on their top holding Plug Power, which hasn't been doing well as of late. Then we'll give some other news and catalysts, and finally we'll give my plan going forward for this ETF. And with all that being said, let's dive right on over to Trading 212. So as it stands, the iShares Global Clean Energy ETF is one of 3 ETFs in my portfolio. It's in the energy sector, obviously, but again, I have 2 other ETFs in the form of the S&P 500, which tracks the top 500 companies in the US, and also I have the FTSE 100, which tracks the top 100 in the UK. At the moment, we have about €8,737 invested, with €138 free funds, up €1,232 or 16.4%. As a very brief overview, this ETF comes with a few different tickers, and the main difference really is just the currency that's traded in. For example, here we can see INRG, which is in USD, and there's 3 main reasons why they suggest you should invest here. Now, there's 30 stocks in this overall ETF, so it's not the biggest ETF by any means, but 30 stocks is still quite diverse in my opinion, as in the clean energy sector there's a lot of subsectors, so this is a great option if you're looking at clean energy. We can also see that it tracks the clean energy exposure, so obviously clean energy is definitely the way forward. And if we saw earlier on in my other videos, that in my energy sector I have 2 other holdings in the form of ExxonMobil and Chevron, which are the kind of 2 old school energy stocks, which are doing very well at the moment. But again, over the next few years, there's definitely going to be a shift from these kind of older school stocks to these cleaner energy stocks. So definitely it's a great opportunity to get in at cheap prices before this really takes off. Just some key points here. They have net assets of over 5.4 billion, nearly 5.5 billion, which is insane. They were incepted on the 6th of July 2007. We can also see here on the left that the rebalance frequency is semi-annually. Now, a lot of people have been asking me if I think that they'll take out Plug Power as their top holding, because it has been doing very poorly as of late. Now, we'll discuss that in a bit more detail later on. But it's kind of interesting to see that this rebalance is semi-annually, and it's not kind of as frequently as people think. We can also see that it distributes semi-annually as well. It has ongoing charges of 0.65%, and finally, it's distributing use of income. Now, since my last video on this ETF, there's been some big changes. It went from 30 holdings to 82, as we can see here, which is actually quite good in my opinion, because it gives a lot more exposure, as a lot of these kind of stocks which we've seen can be volatile, such as Plug Power. So now let's look to see if Plug Power is still the top holding within this 82 stock ETF. So here we can see probably the top 10 holdings of this 82 stock ETF now. Again, it was 30 prior. So it's kind of good news for a lot of people, and I'm quite happy as well that Plug Power is no longer the top holding here. That was about 8% of their overall holdings before, whereas now we can see it's down in probably 9th position with 3.77% of the holding. Now, there's probably 2 main reasons for this. Firstly, because the overall ETF expanded rapidly, so a lot of percentages have been kind of evened out a bit more. There's no kind of top holding as such anymore, thankfully. And Plug Power obviously wasn't doing too well, so they probably sold a lot of their position. But again, it's quite nice to see that they're after diversifying out even more within this ETF, because it gives people even more peace of mind. We can see now that their top holding is Vista's Wind Systems, Ørsted is in 2nd place, and Emphas Energy makes up their top 3 holdings. So again, I can even make a more in-depth video if you wish going down the line on these top 3 holdings within this ETF. So if you want that, comment below and I can sure to make a video on that as well. As it stands, my energy sector pie is up over 10%, so I'm quite happy with how that's going. We can see here I currently have about 35 shares of this iShares Global Clean Energy ETF. Now, it just shows the importance as well of diversification even within sectors. As I mentioned earlier, Chevron and ExxonMobil are doing quite well. Chevron is up over 37% and ExxonMobil is up over 60%. However, this ETF above the clean energy is down 4.1%, which isn't bad considering it was down over 20% or 22% only a few weeks back. So now we're going to have a look at the charts. You can see on the charts here that it's currently trading at about £10.09. Now, the reason it's in GBP is because my current holding is on the London Stock Exchange. So my average price, we can see on the dotted line here, is £10.48. So hopefully when I buy more in the next few weeks, I want to get it down as close at or below the £10 mark as much as I can. Now we can see here, even in the end of last year, it was trading at about £10.21, which was pretty much in line at where it is now, but it did have a fairly good and substantial run up to about £14 or even more a share, £14.20 a share. Now there's a few reasons for that. The first was probably the overall sector, and it was kind of an uptrend, and also it helped substantially with Biden being the new president of the US. But since then, we can see that it has had a fairly fall from grace, and the main reason for that is consolidation. And once the hype of stocks start to die down, obviously it starts to consolidate. But that's not the only reason. The other reason was, in the past, Plug Power, which had financial accounting errors, really dragged down this overall 30 stock ETF. But as we can have seen, it went down to about £8.94. But since then, it has slowly started to recover, and it's currently back over the £10 mark. And that's because mainly they're after really increasing their ETF and have now over 80 stocks, as we've just seen. And now Plug Power is no longer the top holding, it's now in 9th position, so that really does make a big difference. Now, if you've seen any of my prior videos, you'd probably realize that I buy a lot of this ETF consistently, albeit tiny amounts. But over the last few months, I've been buying every week or so, especially because it kept going down in value, as we've seen here. So hopefully now, in the long term, I'll reap the rewards of having a better or cheaper overall average cost. And that's kind of the main plan with all of my stocks, to get as low as an average cost as I can, so long term, we'll make even more profits. Since Plug Power's kind of fall from grace as well in terms of their financial errors, which had a huge impact on their reputation and which could be seen on their share price, they are starting to kind of recover, albeit slowly. But again, even though they're still part of this ETF, they're only in 9th position now out of 80, so it doesn't really make too much of an impact going forward for this overall ETF, but it's still important nonetheless. You can even see how much of an impact this financial error had on the company. We can see here, only a few months back, at the end of January, should I say, it was at about $73 or so a share, and since then it had a rapid decline and is currently trading at a fraction of their overall highs at just under $28 a share. One big piece of news that came out a few days back is Biden's kind of revitalization of this sector and its continued kind of importance within the overall economy. And this can be seen here, where Biden plans to cut emissions and is tied closely to the jobs plan that he has coming as part of his presidential campaign. It's a $2 trillion infrastructure package, which you can see on screen, and that's hoping to revitalize the nation's clean energy grid and create a net zero economy. So obviously it's no surprise that going forward, clean energy is the way to go, and the older school stocks, such as ExxonMobil and Chevron, will slowly peter out. That's kind of my opinion really, and probably the opinion of a lot of people, that clean energy over the next 10 to 15 years is really going to take over. And we can even see here the clean energy employment in perspective, that has currently over 3 million jobs on this perspective going forward. Also, in my opinion, this sector isn't kind of a get rich quick scheme like most sectors, I guess, but again, as a consistent long-term investor, the D-style ETFs or D-style companies, even individual stocks within the sector, are certainly the way forward, as they are really going to gain traction as the years go by. We can even see how well the electric vehicle sector has done already over the past 12 to 18 months. So this is really the tip of the iceberg for this sector, in my opinion. A lot of people have been asking me, am I going to sell this ETF? And the straight answer is no. I'm not in here for the short term. This is certainly long-term goals. So we can see I currently have 34.5 shares. Now, I did state in videos a few days back that I will give it some breathing space over the next few days, because it has kind of came back up a lot over the last few weeks. We can see it's down 4% at the moment, but it was down about 18% more of only a few weeks back. So I'm going to leave it for now. I have been tipping away the last few weeks in terms of dollar cost averaging, but I'll just give it a week or so to see where it goes. If it goes down further in value again, if it drops down to, let's say, 5 to 10%, I'll buy even more. But if it goes into parity or back into the green, well and good, it's in the green as well, and the dollar cost average will have taken effect over the last few weeks. In yesterday's video, I stated there was 3 of my 31 holdings in the red, which one of those was this ETF. The other 2 were Nike and my High Tide penny stock. So I did discuss in that video that I'm going to leave High Tide and the iShares Global Clean Energy ETF this week, as I have been focusing a lot on them over the last few weeks. And for this week, I'm going to start adding 1 position to my utility sector and 1 into materials. And also I'm going to focus on my Nike position, which you can see at the bottom here. We currently have 2.25 shares in this position, and we're down 3.3%. So I'd like to get that back into the green. And it's kind of very rarely where I get to invest further into these style stocks, because usually they're in the green. So I'm going to start pumping in more capital here over the next few days. And as I said, this ETF, I'm going to start putting more in probably next week again, but certainly I won't be selling. So that's pretty much it for today's video. I just wanted to give an update on this iShares Global Clean Energy ETF, ticker symbol ICLN or INRG, depending which one you have. We had a look at my current holdings, my plans going forward. We also had a look at the current share price and how it's performing. We discussed some big news in terms of them going from 30 stocks to over 80, and now Plug Power is not their top holding anymore. We also had a brief discussion on Plug Power. And finally, we kind of give my thoughts and plans going forward for this ETF. If you found this video anyway helpful, it would be much appreciated if you could smash that like button. And I'd love to know in the comment section below if you currently hold this ETF, or if you already sold or planning on buying it, and your reasoning behind it as well. And also if you're happy that it went from 30 stocks to over 80 and now the Plug Power is not their top holding. Thanks very much, enjoy your Monday, and I will see you all in tomorrow's video.